A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I begin as I always begin, in the name of Allah, whose grace I seek in this and all other matters. It is my joy and delight to introduce my friend along the way. Especially, I love when I synchronize with new friends in so many ways, and I've learned so much from Dhiyanah that I feel like, this is a gift to me to have this program and to have you find the time to join us. So welcome.
Thank you.
Dhiyanah Hassan, pronouns she, they, pronounced Dhiyanah Hassan, is an artist healer, a keeper of sacred medicines. Her works began by exploring the significance of reclaiming memory and personal narratives through art. In fully accepting her spiritual gifts and being both spirit and community initiated, Dhiyanah engages her gifts now to forge vibrational tools, self-loving pathways, and creative, oops, sorry, my page is not doing, there we go, and creative frameworks, which she offers as guidance and support for those seeking clarity on their self-healing and spiritual journeys. Dhiyanah recently illustrated and designed the book, The Signs in Ourselves, Exploring Queer Muslim Courage, which she will be sharing some of that artwork with us and some of her process. She is currently focused on creating resources and sharings from guided meditations, prompts, and tarot spreads to exploring the deep dives of self-inquiry processes for her Sacred Library community on Patreon. And I'm going to put the address in the chat, www.patreon.com/by Dhiyanah for those who are interested. Dhiyanah, you have the floor.
Thank you, Auntie Ami. It is such an honor to be here. It's such a joy to be here, and I really love that we sometimes get to meet and do this creative collaboration and conversation with each other, even though we've never met in real life yet. I'm hoping that will change soon. But yeah, it is such an honor. So what I'm gonna do I'm gonna share my screen, and I prepared a slide for you guys. Let me just, okay. Let me see. This is gonna work. Okay, can you guys see? Can everyone see the slide thingy? I think I can see the chat here, yeah. Okay, all right. So what I would like to do is I would like to kind of invite you guys to sit with me in meditation. And we're gonna start with the artwork as our starting point for a very short meditative sequence. So I'm gonna just let you guys take a moment to get comfortable in your chairs or wherever you're seated. As long as your back is as aligned as it can be and your shoulders are relaxed, and you're able to kind of just shake your joints loose a bit, just so you can be in a state of relaxation for this sequence. And then you're gonna I invite you to stare at the artwork, to kind of look at to just place your eyes, your vision on the center of the sun in the art that I'm showing here, and to just allow your eyes to relax as you tune into your breath. And notice if you are holding any tension or tightness in your joints or in your face, to just invite them to soften and relax with each breath. And you're just going to focus, relaxing your eyes in the center of the sun. Inviting your attention from all corners of time and space from all corners of the mind back into the present moment, here and now. And as you tune into your breath, you may feel the deepening and softening of your breath happening all by itself. Perhaps it's your eyes responding to the colors that you're seeing, to the shapes that you are perceiving in your peripheral vision as you stare at the center of the artwork. Notice if you are deepening and expanding your breath. And now I invite you to close your eyes. And as you breathe in now, imagine that you are inhaling golden liquid light from the sun. As you inhale, golden liquid light streaming into your body, into every cell of your being. And as you exhale, this golden light amplifies into a wave of calm and relaxation. Keep breathing, allowing yourself to deepen, to soften as needed. Breathing in golden liquid light. Exhaling and relaxing into the here and now. Breathing in, noticing what sensations are coming up for you. As I'm telling you, I'm guiding you to breathe in golden liquid light. Exhale, notice if there is an additional warmth or an additional sense of being held and nourished and supported in your body, in your heart. Notice if you are becoming more present in your body, how the bones of you are held within the water of you, how your feet is touching the ground. Are you becoming more aware of where you are in time and space? As you breathe in golden liquid light, allow yourself to feel whatever sensation that your body is calling into your attention now. Keep breathing. And now you're going to imagine that there is a giant sun that is illuminated around your head. And it's going to take whatever color that is the color of your thoughts in the past week. It's going to take up whatever texture that represents the flow of your energies over the past week. And you're just going to simply observe what you're being shown right now. And as you breathe in golden liquid light into the sun, into the space around your head. And you're going to now imagine that all this energy is now being gathered into an orb of light in the center of your mind. All the texture and colors of the past few weeks, of the past week or so, being gathered and collected into this calming orb of light, of stillness in the center of your mind. And you're just going to place your attention there as you keep breathing. And you're going to watch it flow down from the center of your mind. You're going to watch it go down into your throat, And as it makes its way down, it calms and harmonizes all the energies around your body. Allow it to travel into your heart, where it ignites the light of your heart's truth. Allow it to bring your attention to your heartbeat now. For additional support, you may place a hand over your heart and just stay with the heartbeat for a little while. And you're going to now allow that orb of light to go down into your solar plexus, into your stomach and sacral chakra, into the seat of your body, into your hips, down to your legs, knees, and feet. You're going to just pay attention to the bottom of your feet, how it's being held up by the ground beneath you, and how the ground beneath you is being held up by the earth around you. You're now going to imagine that this orb of light is being amplified so that it fills up the spaces around you, filling up the spaces in front of you, both sides of you, as if in a loving embrace, all the way to the back of you, strengthening your spine, relaxing the energetic portals in the back of your body, relaxing the back of your neck, your head, strengthening your connection to your root chakra, to the seat of your body. And this light is now expanding above and below you, so that everywhere your awareness goes to, this light is present and is able to bring you back to your heart's truth whenever you need to. You are now in the center of this bright sun. You can just take your time breathing in the sensations, the feelings, the shifts that have moved you as you walked through this process. And when you are ready, when the process feels complete, you may open your eyes. So if anyone would like to share how they went with that, please do so in the chat and I will read it out later. And I hope that was at the very least kind of, grounding for the crazy energies that we're in right now with the super full moon. Why I wanted to start with that today is because that moment where you go into yourself, when you engage with the artwork, and then I'm with my own voice guiding you to come into yourself, for the sake of kind of almost expanding the light of your heart, the shift that happens in that space, that the space that we've all just experienced, that's the essence with which I tend to my art practice with. That's what drives me to create art, as the person that I am now, and as the person that I want to see myself as in the future, inshallah. Okay, so I'm trying to move the slide, but I don't know how to do that. Okay, there you go. There you are. So that artwork is one of the artwork from the book, The Science in Ourselves, written and compiled by my friend Lee Yusuf and with art and design by me, and published by CSBR last year, 2020. And this is one of the first few pieces that I completed for this project. So it's one that I return to a lot just for my own personal, like, if I want to like feel happy or good, I kind of come back to this art. This is one of the artworks that can do that for me really quickly. And it's because when I was creating this artwork, I was seeing a lot of double rainbows right outside my apartment. There was this time where I just, I think it was like, I saw 5 or so rainbows in the span of a few months. And it was around the time that I was working on this project. And I know that I wanted to do, Lee and I were talking and we were like, I want to include a lot of rainbow imagery, like subtly interspersed within the entire book, the visual narrative of the book. And this was one of the first pieces that ended up being completed. And it was also, for me, it became the centerpiece of how I designed the process of designing the visual narrative of the book. So, okay, let me just see the chat. Warm and comforting, it was refreshing. I usually find it difficult to quiet my mind and focus, but this helped. That's really great to hear. And I also find that having a visual cue helps with getting into that center, getting into that stillness, because sometimes that the concept of stillness can be so abstract that it's not something that you're used to holding if you don't have the practice yet. So if you're just getting started, you're just like, what is stillness? What is peace? What is being a good friend to myself look like? And for me, the visual language can fill in the gaps in trying to take something that is intangible, abstract, or mysterious and give a little bit of an anchor for us to kind of feel like, okay, this is a point with which I can start. Like how we started up the meditation off by viewing the sun in the artwork, and that kind of helped unlock our own creative visioning processes. And if you notice, after a while, I stopped saying what color for you guys to imagine. I was just saying orb of light. So it could have been whatever color that you need it to be to feel calm and at ease. And hopefully that resonated with those of you who walked through this process live or in the replay. Ruben says a lot of beautiful images, but this is one of my favorite ones. Yeah, this artwork is definitely one of my favorite ones in the book too. Okay. Now I'm trying to move to the next. I'm trying to move to the next slide and it won't let me. I'm trying to figure out why. Okay. Okay. So art and healing and art as healing. I use the term art and healing for what I do as an artist and as an energy worker, as someone who is an intuitive healer, who has, so I basically what that means is I have services and I also share guidance on how one can design their own self-loving practices to tend to their spiritual well-being, their self-healing processes, and their overall growth. And the reason I use the term art and healing is because I honor that where I come from a place of being spirit initiated and community initiated. So it's not based on the formal training of art therapy. And so while it is different, there are different boundaries with both aspects, with both modalities. There are also different experiences that we are able to create for the people who come to us as, let's say, someone who's formally trained and someone who is spiritually trained. and a lot of the times they do overlap, but I also want to just respect that there is a distinction between someone who is formally trained by institutions and also someone who is formally trained by a lived experience and spiritual training. For me, it's important, I guess in my life trajectory, it was important for me to come through this pathway because it was in alignment with my own journey of decolonizing well-being, decolonizing mental health, and decolonizing spirituality, in the sense that a lot of the times when we go into a formal institution, we're taught to kind of put a certain hierarchy in how we are organizing the information that we receive and the information that we respond to. And that hierarchy can be limiting. It can also be very helpful. So it depends on what we need, because I believe that you don't practice, when it comes to healing or facilitation, you give what you receive, you give what you're overflowing. So if the pathway is not healing for you, then when you hold space for someone else, it becomes harder to hold healing space for them, because that's not what you're receiving from your pathway. So for me, it was important that I came through this pathway, because this was where I got the most healing. It was looking within the self, the inner community of the self, and utilizing that internal space, the internal landscape within, to teach me how to find the version of me that is whole, that has always been whole, regardless of the trauma, regardless of whatever ruptures that have happened in my history, and to allow that person to come forward to come through me, through my personality, through my work, through through how I connect to other people, through how I connect to my clients or my community. And one thing that has always remained throughout all the different journeys that I have been through, just to kind of get here, just to kind of get to the space where I'm like, yes, I accept myself as a healer, I accept myself as an artist healer, and as a keeper of sacred medicine. The common kind of support system that has always been in place was art. So for me, I came to art through a response of wanting to stay alive, despite so many things around me telling me that what I am or who I am genuinely is something that is wrong, that should not be seen, that should not be seen in a certain way, that I cannot be myself. And I grew up with a lot of violence, my body being the site of a lot of violence, being a recipient of that. And that has done a lot of damage. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat it any other way. It has done a lot of damage. And for me, I ran to art almost desperately, because I wanted something that felt safe. I wanted something that could help me feel safe in my body. And when I was creating drawings and I was trying to make sense of the world through sketches and through the visual language, I like to say that like my first language is visual language, and then only like English and others. None of which I'm actually fluent in, except for English and visual language, by the way. Anyway, yeah, so I came to art through pain. And even though it taught me a lot about how to survive trauma, how to survive survival itself, that was not where I wanted to continue creating from. There came a few turning points in my life, thanks to art, thanks to the support of art as well, that I was able to kind of teach myself that I can choose something different for myself. And that's when art became, I took a bit of a break from kind of thinking about art in terms of like work or career. And in that space, I was able to return back to art from a place of wanting to amplify the pathways of healing, rather than to continuously commit myself to just that one pathway of trauma release, of trying to resolve trauma that doesn't get resolved just because you made an artwork of it. Trauma doesn't get resolved just because you made an artwork of it. And that's something that I have been sitting with, because as someone who came to art from that pathway, from the pathway of pain, I have inherited the legacy of the tortured artist, which is also the legacy of the wounded healer. And now I'm learning how to let that go. And it's funny, because in that space where I was not focusing on art so much, I thought that I needed to focus on something else now. I need to like go and learn something new, because it's like, okay, art has, art now it's so married to that survival mode of me that I now have to kind of look for something else. But it turns out that it was art itself that I can use to help me make that shift from art being a conduit to reclaim my narrative from the grasp of trauma, into art being keys that can unlock new doors, new pathways, where I'm learning how to center joy. So I'm learning how it feels like to create from a place of joy, and not just from a place of, oh, I need to write about this terrible thing that happened to me. Like, that's great. Again, like, that's very helpful, and that creates the catharsis that is needed for that emotional alchemy. But it is not where you land. It is not where you build your home in. And that's what I'm learning from dealing with this, from holding with that desire, from holding the legacy of that wounded healer and the wounded artist, and being ready to let go of it. I'm kind of looking back now and seeing all the ways that that it can move forward in a more expansive way. So hopefully that makes sense. I have presented here 2 prompts that I would like y'all to kind of take home if you feel good about taking home, if you feel good about responding to it in the chat. You can do so as well. So it's 2 prompts. It's what ignites the creation of art. And this is for whoever. So if you have, like, if you like to look at art, if you like to create art, or if you think about creating art, even just for your own personal sake, even for your own healing or self-enrichment, what ignites the desire to create art? What do you think ignites the desire to create art in someone else, in the person, in an artist that you are viewing? And this is just something to think about as you are engaging with the visual world, because the visual world is very much in tune with, let's just say that a lot of institutions use visual language to kind of create subliminal messages that we then take on without really knowing, just because we have a desire to engage with pop culture, or with the mainstream media, or with any media. So just kind of trying to be aware of, like, what could ignite the desire to create art can be really helpful, to just kind of allow us to kind of engage with the visual language outside of us, and then to come home to, like, what is true for the visual language within us. So let me just look at the chat real quick, because I saw. Okay. Nisha said, sometimes when you are formally trained in something, you get dulled to your instinct and senses. Oh, that is very, very real. This is something that I've also noticed in myself, because I'm formally trained as a fine artist, and that break that I took was a direct response to the art industry, and just having a lot of what was expected of me, as an artist, as a brown woman artist, or whatever, all these identities, right? What was expected of me from my identity and from how I look, or whatever, or how I was creating, I felt like that was killing me. And I got into a lot of exploitative and very abusive environments, because I was trying to put my art out there into the world, because I genuinely want to kind of share what I have learned, and I want to see it being received, because that for me is healing as well. But I wasn't able to experience that as much. Instead, I experienced that, what you said, the dulling of instinct and senses, and I had to pull back. I had to pull every resources that I have from investing in the art industry, because it just wasn't investing in me, in my well-being. And Ruben said, yes, moving away from trauma, pain, porn trend on social media, and moving into creating from joy, breaking that tortured artist archetype. It's like, this is like a healing generational trauma kind of thing. Because when you're a creative person, you are inheriting creative energy from not just like your ancestors, but also the collective ancestral realm. So if there are artists who have come, there have been a lot of artists in history who have come to art through pain. And they have created beautiful, beautiful, alchemizing, transformative work through engaging, dialoguing with their pain and with their creative skills. And yet they still end up at the bottom of rivers or in poverty. It's and for me, like and for me, that was there's a book by Alice Miller. I can't remember the title of the book, but the author is Alice Miller, and she has one book out where she illustrates how a lot of the artists and their biography, those who have created art from trauma and grief and pain, but were unable to actually move on from the pain, were unable to actually get to the stage where they were actually healing and healed. A lot of them end up creating more and more works from pain, because again, that the industry expects it of you. If you are successful at creating work from pain, the industry then expects it from you, and then you expect that from yourself. And they usually end up worse than they were before, right? So there is something in the collective memory that needs to be reckoned with when it comes to artistic healing, or creative healing. So the second prompt that I would like to share with you today is what fuels our personal and collective need for art. And I'm going to let you guys, that's a very straightforward one. I'm going to let you guys sit with that for however long you need to, and share it in the chat if you feel like. Yeah, I'm trying to move the slide. Okay. So this is one, so all the art that I'm showing here are all art from the book, The Signs in Ourselves. And this one is an illustration in response to a dream that one of the interviewed participants shared. And I included it in this one because the dream that was shared in this part of the book where this image shows up, that was the first fragment of the book that I read, that Lee sent to me. This was the make it or break it point for them. They sent the fragment of the dream, the text of the dream to me, and they were like, I can't remember exactly what they said, but it was like, what do you think about this? Do you think you can make art, or how do you feel about making art with a book for this project? And like, here's a sample, like, what do you think about it? And I was just like, this is right up my alley. In the sense that it's, a lot of what I do with art as a child, when I was developing my visual language, had to do with dreams. And it's funny because while art informed so much of my hopes and dreams as a child, I'm finding it's quite a struggle to hold it as a hope and dream as an adult, now that I know it, now that I have seen the shadow sides of the industry and art communities. I'm a bit like, where do my hopes and dreams, where can I locate that within the larger collective? And I'm still figuring that out. But as an artist and healer, having accepted that role and that aspect of myself, that truth in myself, I've also come to learn that I've been humbled by the fact that art and creativity helps me to keep my dreams alive. Because there were moments where I thought I needed to kill off my dreams in order to kind of be more practical, to be more, to kind of, it's the recycling of the survival narrative, where it's like you survived your trauma, and now you have to survive the world, and the world becomes traumatic because that's what you know to that's the pattern of your survival. So in order to kind of shift that, this is where creativity can come in. Because in order for you to shift that and create something new, you need to be able to imagine something new in place of what was there to begin with. So if the cycle is getting traumatized and then surviving from that trauma, then what happens next to kind of break that cycle? Something different has to happen in that cycle to break it. And in that moment of rupture of that cycle, you reclaim your imagination. So you expand what you're able to imagine as possible. And by doing so, you are dissolving limitations. And the more you practice this, so you can start as simply as like with a simple creative visualization. And if you do it every day, that's going to affect how you make decisions in the external world. So that when you're at another crossroad in life, you're going to make a decision that's different than the decision that keeps you stuck in the pattern of cycle of trauma and survival. So Amina said, The Drama of the Gifted Child, perhaps. It's a different book from Alice Miller. No, it's not on my shelf. But it is one of her books. I do know that she's the author. I just can't remember the exact title of that one. My news for beauty stems from my sacred journey, where God is beauty and everything ugly is the absence of divine sacred. But it is always personal, never based on outside authority. My need, not news. Okay, so my need for beauty stems from my sacred journey, where God is beauty and everything ugly is the absence of divine and sacred. But it is always personal, never based on the outside authority. I love that you mentioned that it is never based on outside authority, because I think that's where a lot of us, talking about creativity and dreams, a lot of us tend to base our hopes and dreams on what we see outside of us. It's what we see as, like you said, authority on beauty outside of us. Like, oh, this person is living this kind of life and that looks great. So that means I have to reshape all my hopes and dreams to match their hopes and dreams in order for me to make those decisions to get there. But if it's not your truth, it's not going to be beautiful for you. That's what I've learned. So yeah, I wanted to share that creativity helps the reclamation of imagination, because when we're going through a hardship or a trauma, our imagination is snatched away from us. And that's what keeps us in the cycle of survival and trauma. So by reclaiming the imagination, using creative tools, meditation, creative visualization, coloring, drawing, journaling, poetry, anything that gets you into the voice, anything that gets you to know the different voices of yourself, and then figuring out how to locate the voice of your heart's truth. Once you latch onto it, once you hear that voice, you're not going to unhear it. You're always going to be able to come back to it. And creativity helps with that, because it expands the imagination, dissolves the limits inside that you have created inside you, the shields, the fortresses that you have created around your heart. It is able to get through those, and for the voice, the still voice inside you, to kind of come out, to resonate out. And this is probably one of my favorite double spreads from the book, and it is I call this the queer garden. I think both Lee and I called this the queer garden when we were working on the book together. And this is basically a big family and community, and you can tell, and you can't tell. So what I did with this piece was, from just one look at it, you can't really tell if there's anything different from it, from, like, let's say a mainstream image of like a family relaxing in the kampong, in the village of a rural Southeast Asian town. But then when you look closer, you'll be able to see, like, there's like rainbow details on the top of the house, and you'll notice that everyone is wearing what they want to wear, and that everyone's accepting each other for who they are. And then you can see, like, there are some very obviously queer coded characters and some a bit more ambiguous characters. And there's a whole, and it's the kind of the diversity, right? The diversity of all these different people with different lived experiences, but they share a common ground. And the common ground is that they're willing to accept each other. They're willing to know each other for who they are, and not what other people expect of them, not how well they fit into like any kind of dogmatic version of society, but it's just for who they are. Like, there are families here who are like, there are so many different forms of family just in this one image. And for me, creating this was a very emotional process, because it was not something that I have ever seen before. So then I had to dive into the resources of my imagination to figure out, how am I going to create an artwork that is who's the very idea of having a visual like this was emotionally moving, and even a bit triggering for me, because it was like, this is very obviously a Southeast Asian setting. And whenever queer Muslims or queer people of color think about freedom, we think about somewhere else. We think about another country. We don't think about at home. We don't think about home country. So this was emotionally challenging for me and also creatively exciting, because I got to use my own visual voice, my own visual language to kind of write this into existence in a way through this artwork. And hopefully that was the energy that I was creating this in. So hopefully when people see this, when the readers are, you know, flipping through the book and they come across this double spread, hopefully that's what they get, which is kind of a bit of a wow moment of expanded imagination, where it's like, I didn't think I could ever see a kampong house that is also like a safe haven for queer people, for queer Muslims. But here it is, and there's even a little surah in the background in the backyard there. Let's see the chat real quick. Ruben's like, why was it so important for you to create these artworks, especially for queer Muslims? I think it's for what I said, which is that visuals can help us expand our imagination, which helps us expand our realities, helps us expand what we're able to contribute and receive from reality. And I know saying that, and maybe some people hearing that might feel like that just seems like an oversimplification of all the things that we have to deal with, like oppression, systemic, blah, blah, blah. But it really does have to start in the internal landscape. For you to have the language to create it externally, for you to have the resources to create something that is beyond the mainstream collective imagination, you have to be able to create it in the internal landscape of you. So you can also look at the same artwork that I'm showing, and you can imagine this to be a corner of your heart garden, of your inner landscape. Where would this be located? If you were looking at this and this is like the internal landscape of your psyche, where would this be, as a queer Muslim looking at this, or as a queer person of color looking at this, where would this be located? Is it in the center? Is it in the front? Is it way back in the shadows where you haven't even looked in a really long time? So maybe you should go look there and see what gifts that part of you has for you. And you can also look at this artwork and imagine that every single one of these people is you. So you're the child throwing the paper airplane. You're also the old lady tending to the garden and teaching the younger people around her how to grow their own food, right? So create the story that is most true for you. That's what artwork like this can do. And that's how I create. That's the kind of intention and the work that I do, the inner work that I do, a lot of that is to kind of polish my visual language, to polish my language, to polish my presence in order for me to create work that is able to hopefully be welcoming enough for you to do these kind of little creative exercises as you're seeing them, which is like, where is this located inside me? Or who am I? Who am I in this? Do I see myself in this, or do I see parts of myself in this? And then what conversations or what insights come through from that? You must be able to imagine it to create it. Yes, exactly. So we've talked about a little bit about art as a conduit for future visioning. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about art as a conduit for cultivating presence. So this page in the book is the gratitude map. What Lee did was gave me a list of things that people shared with them that what they were grateful for. There was a list from the survey, if I'm not mistaken, and they put together the list and they sent it to me, and they were like, what do you want to do? Do what you want with this. And I told them that I was going to create a gratitude map, because I want this to be its own special thing in the book. Because for me, gratitude is one way to kind of stay present with what you have, while again, accepting that you are able to expand your imagination. So if you're going through like literally the worst day of your life, but if you like end that day by trying to take down 5 things that you're grateful for, you're going to change that day. You're going to change the energetic essence of that day, so that when you go to sleep, the day that comes after that will be a completely new and different day. Like you're not carrying some of that baggage from the bad day into the new day. At least that's been my experience, and that's what I have witnessed as well from having a gratitude practice in place, I've also seen that you start with 5 or you start with 3 things and you keep going because you're just like, there's so many things that I'm actually that brings me love and joy and warmth and nourishment. And I didn't see all of that stuff because this other storyline, this other narrative, and while the narrative of the bad day is still true, right? Sometimes it becomes so thick that it turns into a veil, a wall, and you can't see through it. And we don't ever want any of our storylines to get that opaque because it's hard to move on from them when they're that solidified. Our storylines should be like water. And if you notice in the book, the way I've arranged the text in each and literally every single page is like water. I wanted it, even before I had the finished manuscript, I knew that I wanted the storylines, everyone's storylines, everyone's realities, what everyone has shared from their heart about their experiences and their realities. I wanted it all to flow like water across the page, and which is why you'll see like the text going like because I wanted that flowy, that flowing movement to create the sensation, so that when you're reading someone's storyline, you're also reading how it's changing from one voice to another. You're also reading how it's growing from one question, how they're answering one question to how another voice is answering another question. And that's also going to be able to help you understand the diversity, how to kind of flow with the diversity of the voices within you as well, because we are not just one voice. We go through so many experiences, and while we have, I believe in the frameworks that I teach, the heart's truth never wavers. So the voice of the heart's truth is always going to sound, it's always going to have a certain timbre, a certain essence to it. But then there are all these voices from the personalities that we have developed or had to live through in order, just from even without trauma or hardships, we're going through every single year, we're going through every single person that we are. So we have all these different voices. We rarely ever take the time to listen to any of these voices. We rarely ever take the time to figure out who is speaking, who am I speaking from? Like, which part of me am I speaking from? Which storyline am I in when I'm perceiving this happening to me? And how am I perceiving it happening to me? Because all of these things texture the way we receive our reality, and how we receive our reality influences the way we create reality. So again, it's that, as within, so without, as above, so below, that the relationship between the inner and the outer. So for me, gratitude practice is a practice that brings us back into the present moment. It also helps us cultivate and ground into the present moment. And something that I always go back to is the Surah Ar-Rahman. فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. Which of your Lord's gifts would you both deny? I'm talking to both the beings in the seen and the unseen realm, right? And it is, for me, that is the fact that in the entire surah, that line comes back like a chorus, like a zikr. It's for me, I was reading that surah a lot when I was working on this book. And one of the reasons why I wanted to create the double spread, the artwork for the gratitude map, and to kind of highlight it, is because in that surah, it basically says, like, how are you, it's basically asking you, how are you going to articulate what Allah has given you today? So for me, the gratitude practice it's a practice of, it's showing up for that. It's responding to that. And I visualized it as a gratitude map. I think Ruben asked the question. She says, this piece looks like a little like star horoscope sign. Yeah, it's definitely inspired by star constellations. And if you look at the original book and the original double spread in the next page, all the 12 zodiac signs are actually around are actually illustrated around the border of the prompt. So Ruben asked, how did you find the inspiration to create this piece? So the inspiration to create this piece was to present an example of a gratitude practice, and to present it with visual language rather than just having it as a list. Because I want to be able to suggest to people, like, what is the difference between reading these exact words in a list and reading it in a gratitude map? right? So you can see that like some words are collected in like a group of constellation and some words are on its own. And what I basically wanted to kind of give an example of is how much more engaged can you be? How much more present can you be with the gratitude practice if you were to turn it into something visual rather than something textual? While both have its medicine, it's just taking it a step further, being a little bit more intentional in where you place certain words and how you place them, how you arrange them, and just seeing how that, if that has a difference for you, if it changes, if it's easier for you to remember what you're grateful for in the next day, or if it's easier for you to kind of pause and take note of the things that you're grateful for as you're going through the day, because that's when the gratitude practice really has that vibrational effect, is when the practice, when the actual kind of when the creative practice has expanded itself to become part of the day-to-day practice, right? So when your practice of cultivating or finding beauty in life becomes so vast and so big, it's so much part of you that even if you are looking at something that you would see as something that is ugly or something that is not in alignment with divinity, you're still able to see how it fits into a tapestry, which in itself has its own beauty, because everything is part of everything is divine. And from that perspective, everything is divine. And it's just about kind of learning how to make friends with the different voices of ourselves, the different perspectives that we're able to see through, and knowing which one that we are co-creating our reality with. If that makes sense. Okay. So creativity as a guide for reclaiming the past, reinstating our agency within our life story. So I've already spoken a lot about that. I feel like I've already shared a lot about that. I just wanted to maybe just add on by saying that this artwork is one of the artworks for the end of the book, where we presented letters to our young self. So the interviewed participants presented letters to their young self. What would you say to a younger version of yourself? And Ruben says this one brings tears to my eyes because it really resonates for me. Yeah. Yeah. So as you can see, it's a person looking to a mirror, but instead of the reflection looking back at them, it's their child self. And this is where you can download the book for free. bit.ly/science in ourselves. There's no space between those words. That's a mistake. So, so just make note of that. And these are my links. So if you want to check more of my works out, here they are. Here are all the spaces that I hang out in online. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing now. Okay, I think that was good. I think I shared a lot more than I wanted to.
Thank you so much for the rich sharing. Actually, I think for my little part here, in the interest of time, I just want to say two kinds of things. One is about this publication, The Science in Ourselves, and the other is about my encounter with you and why I have experienced this in such a meaningful way. When you get to be as old as I am, and also I'm blessed with a lot of travel and opportunities, to meet people. You come to a place where you can be friendly with everybody and you can be respectful, but then there's also people that you kind of like get a hook and you just kind of run with that. And as I get older, and most of those people are like younger than me, and I get to be the auntie, who is also literally a mother. So I have children in the same age as my nieces and nephews across the planet. But of course, my nieces and nephews, I have no responsibility for their trauma or anything, where I have to take responsibility for some of the stuff with my kids. So it's like the icing on the cake, you know? But also, you know, in this role, you know, when you showed your last slide with the speaking to your younger self, and there's a mirror, but the image at the other side of the mirror is the child. I remember my journey through my own sort of, you know, Islamic Muslim modality. I remember that road as being particularly lonely relative to what I see happening in the world today. And as such, I think, you know, we are now living in a time where your compound scene, which I love the way you express that it is from your own Southeast Asian background, but often when you are queer and brown or queer and Muslim, you keep thinking that some ideal location has to be somewhere else. So the idea of reclaiming so many aspects of identity in the context of what I have experienced as a greater broadband acceptance of diversity. And to me, diversity is in fact an expression of beauty. It is a form of art in and of itself. And before, we lived in a very binary halal haram, you know, do and don't do expression of Islam. And many of us didn't fit so neatly into those boxes, and some of us didn't even want to. But the question was, where do you get affirmation of that except from the N-word? And of course, the N-word, as you've rightfully expressed many times, the N-word is the necessary starting point. But given this, super warm moon in Libra, opposite Aries, Sun, and Chiron, apparently coming to terms with how we do relationships with regard to our best self and our healing is the thing that's on the, on the table, or, out there in the atmosphere. And so one of the things that I would like to say with regard to meeting you is I have witnessed, over the course of the past year, because we're literally pandemic buddies. I mean, I don't know, I consider you a buddy, so don't worry about that. I'm an auntie buddy. We're literally pandemic buddies because I got to know you better when I started the Patreon page, which was a response to my fear that during the pandemic, the airwaves would be taken over by a more conservative, Salafi, Wahhabi, patriarchal, hegemonic, androcentric, homophobic Muslims who have the resources to use these new technologies. And I just thought, I want to be a part of the solution. So, I started the Patreon page, and that's how we first met. And yet, we had a very vibrant kind of encounter. And one of the things that I really enjoy about spending time with you is watching your process, and that your process is present, and at the same time, it draws from your past, both the good parts of it and the trauma of it, to push forward back to the present, and then to make a trajectory towards the future, which is in fact wholesome, well, beautiful, that kind of thing. And fortunately, the maid is here, I won't have to answer that door. But just watching this process, I'm gonna make a little slip into the book, and then, hopefully you'll respond. When I was first asked to review the manuscript by Lee, who, they gave me that opportunity before the final product, which included the visuals, which just like brought it to a whole nother dimension, truly. The one thing that I repeated with her which I want you to sort of take up here for a second if you can, is how necessary it is for the diversity of Muslims to express themselves out there. Because not just your child self who didn't see, a model. I don't know why they're not answering the door, and I'm not going to even pay attention to it. So excuse the doorbell in the background. I don't know how it was when you did not see a model as you're growing up, so that you had nothing to respond to except for adults and authorities who were pushing back in a negative and violent way. How do we make sure that we give expressions of the diversity of Islam so that another generation does not have that same trauma? And that's what I consider to be really, really important about this work in all of its dimensions. Maybe also you can type it into the chat for those who might want to see it from there. But could you just talk a little bit about that process with this particular project and how that project actually affirms other things that you've said about the journey of healing and art?
Okay, so let me try to find a starting point for that. So I would start by, for me, like I would like to start, I usually tend to start with like, what do you know? What do you know first? Because that's going to inform where you're at, as well as, let's say, where your limitations are at as well, in terms of the imagination. So with a project like this, the beauty of the project is that it takes so many different voices, and it's our lived experiences. It's also our living hopes and dreams that give voice to that, to the symphony of that has become the book. And having that multi-stranded dialogue between one person's lived reality and another person's lived reality, that for the reader reading something that has so many different lived realities in there is like a space that opens up between each voice, and that space is where the reader can land in that space. Can kind of like, it's something that the reader can pull in and create the spaciousness within to find what is true for them, the modality that is truest for them in expressing whatever it is that they want to express from the location of their truth. So, we know that one of the biggest gifts that art has and creativity has given us collectively is that we're able to tell stories that we wouldn't have otherwise thought of. Fiction, science fiction, even memoir writing, when you put it into a book and you put it out there, someone is going to resonate with it in a way that allows, someone's going to resonate with it in a way that allows them to respond to it by responding to something within them. The thing that is resonating within them, that's what they're responding to. And that creates even more diversity, even more expression and experiences of diversity. And the first thing that we have to know is that we are not here by chance. We're not on planet Earth by chance. We are not given these identities that we can't choose. We're not given these identities because they're a mistake. We're given them because there is a voice, there is a song, there is an artwork, there is a book, or there is a sharing that we're here to let go of from inside of us. But in order for us to let it go into the world, we must first know how we carry it. So that's why I say, look at what you already know, right? Figure out what it is that you already know to figure out where your limitations are. And then look beyond you. And what this project is able to do is it gives you that anchor point of looking beyond, because with the spaces within you, the reader, and the voice of the book, the voices in the book, or the spaces between the voices in the book. All of that is space that you can pull into your present moment and be like, what can I create here? What can I, how can I contribute to this, to what to the resonance that I'm feeling? How can I express it? Even if it's just to express it in the safety of your own community, right? And that's important for a lot of people who are living the narrative of the experience of being marginalized or stigmatized. Cultivating safety, whatever that looks like, whether it's safety in your mind, if you don't have anywhere else to be safe in, safety in the pages of a journal, if you don't have anywhere else to be safe in, cultivating that is extremely important because you need to seed it. You need it to be seeded in the lands of you, in the earth of you, for it to grow, because eventually it's going to keep growing. If you keep tending to it, it's going to keep growing, and it will ripple out. It will create some energetic and vibrational ripples in the collective memory. And we've already seen that happen. We're seeing now, as you said, Auntie Ami, that we're living in a time now where you can see more and more diversity out in the open. And maybe, maybe not in certain parts of the world, but you're still able to see it in the media now more than ever before. And that is, again, that didn't happen because a bunch of us decided that we need to stay quiet forever. It happened because there is a calling.
But I just think I want to, remind us about the passage of time. I mean, with this full moon, I'm 68 and a half. It's my official, half a year marker, the full moon in Libra. I've been almost 50 years as a Muslim adult, moving in a direction that now I'm really much more clear what it was. And the thing that I keep saying is that the challenge of the future of Islam and Muslims is actually diversity, internal diversity, because we've played out the post-colonial reactionary, everything from the West is bad and everything from Islam is good. We played that to the maximum, it's done. However, what happens is we don't know how to accept the fact that everybody within, whatever is this box that they call Islam, but everybody within is not the same, but that does not make them any less in any way, in their humanity, in their Islam or whatever. And the reality is that you are a generation that live in a time where you have absolute control over creating a narrative for future generations that has never been articulated before. And it's very difficult when, I align myself with the queer Muslim community. I identify as queer for reasons I won't go into here. But the reality is that you have a unique opportunity to be the beginning of something that will forever change how we think about Islam. And because there is so much trauma, the conversation you were having about the expressions of gratitude, and that not just on the line, but also, what happens if you make them more aesthetic and, present them in a more visual way. And that the exercise of gratitude was all about how to remember that even though there is this trauma, people are still experiencing traumas, even though that is there, that simultaneously there were these kernels of goodness. And to take those kernels of goodness and understand that when you squish them down into the soil, they don't disappear, they give birth, they flower, they shine, they rise, they become strong, powerful trees that provide us shade. So I love this expression in the Science of Ourself that is a collaborative work between you, Lee, in terms of their interviews with other, queer voices, but also, because remember, I had 2 layers of experience. I got all the words, I'm a words person, I got all the words, I was already excited, and then I get the final product, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So I am urging everybody to, it's free for you to download. For those of you just watching the video and haven't been able to attend, I will put in the comment section the link. This is such an amazing contribution to that very image, you know, because I have another friend that, you know, I borrowed that expression from, they thought they would bury us, they didn't know we were seeds. And,
Ooh.
you know, the whole, yeah, so the whole project is such an amazing expression of that. And just imagine when you get to the 50-year mark, just in years, let alone 50 years of a certain thing, or this product is 50 years, you know, out there. It's going to seem like, oh, wow, you know, I can't believe that this was where things like this, you know, were getting started. But we really are a starting generation with regard to the internal challenge of Islam to embrace diversity as a necessary aspect of humanity and the only way that Islam can fulfill its purpose. So I really wish that we had more time, but in the interest of trying to put together kind of uniform entries, I just want to ask if there's anyone from the gallery who wants to make an intervention in any way. Lovely for me is that Dhiyanah is on top of the chat. She's able to stay better on top of it than I have. So that she has already answered questions that have come up. So we have had some interaction. But before I close, I really want to know if there's anyone else who feels that they want to jump in any way. Just let me know. We'll just take a minute to, give space for that if anybody's willing.
While we wait for that, can I add something just real quick that just came through? So as I was listening to what you were saying and sharing about how we're on a turning point, right? We're a turning point generation. And sometimes it doesn't feel that way because, obviously, I'm 32 this year, so I'm in it and I'm in the thick of it, right? It doesn't feel like that all the time. It doesn't feel like that most of the time. Most of the time, it just feels like, I'm trying to make sense of what I've been given. And I realized that was a lot of how I felt when I was creating the art for the project, where it's like, when you're in it, when you're in the thick of it, you don't know what the sound is. You don't know what the final piece is going to do. You don't know what the movement's how it's going to ripple out. And that's not really necessarily for you to think about. So I kind of also want to say for whoever that might resonate with that, where it's like, if you're in the thick of it, be in the thick of it, right? That's where you need to be. That's where you can make the most. That's where you can make the most movement. Just be in the present.
I love this expression of the experience because it simply means that in the process you were present. You were not talking about, if I plant this seed or I plant this bulb, I've got to wait. Because in the US, when we do, I think they're called annuals or perennial. Anyway, there's those two words. And if you put certain bulbs in the ground, you must do it at a certain time. And then you must wait 3 or 4 months before they come up. And what's happening is because of the spring solstice, just last week, that some of those perennials are coming forth like daffodils and crocuses. And when you live in cold climates, these are the first signs that the earth has always been giving birth. She's always, taking something and nurturing it. And so when you're in the darkness of the earth, sometimes it's difficult for you to think about the light. But the reality is that the cooking, the process, the worm in the cocoon that becomes the butterfly, all of that, you need the full darkness for that transformation to come about. And so sometimes just being present in your reality is the best way to be there in the effervescent stage when things pop up through the soil. So it's okay, because this is not meant to say that everything is rosy. This is not meant to say that we have come to a place where the dignity of divergent Muslims is being affirmed by the dominant, patriarchal, hegemonic, phobic, bodies. That is not to try to pretend that everything is rosy for everybody. but it is to express, as I think this volume does, and as I definitely love your artwork and your, online presence, to express the possibilities. And in expressing those possibilities, they become even more manifest. So that is my gratitude to you as my niece, and for joining me on Friends Along the Way and for the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.